I went to a private school in the West Strand. It was called Maragon Private School. A couple of years ago, got bought over by Crawford, so it's now called Crawford Ramesuk or Crawford International Ramesuk.
It's in Hampshire.
Yeah,
Hmm. So did you have to? Your parents have to make the commute every morning?
every morning to Ramesuk.
All right. It's American, but American was good school, right?
It was a very good school. It was very small when I first started. It's obviously much bigger now. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
when I started, there was about what 60 kids in my grade. So very small
Nice.
school.
So
Yeah,
hands-on learning.
yeah, pretty much.
Do you think that has an effect on the type of quality you become later?
So that's an interesting one, right? Because I wouldn't say going to a private school has a impact on the person you become later. I think you're better off saying that it's the people that you meet that has an impact on who you become with later. Remember, in high school, that's where you're finding yourself, what you like, what you don't like, and it does
Yeah.
shape your personality for a long time. And I was grateful or blessed or whatever you want to call it to have met some really decent people, had their heads screwed on straight, weren't into like, the hardcore things, drugs and, all of that type of stuff. So the
Yeah.
peer pressure is a thing. And
Sure.
I mean, sure, there's always the small peer pressure, smoking, drinking, that's fine. You most cases you have the strength to actually, either avoid that or, unfortunately not, and you give it a try, But I was fortunate enough to have met people who had that same mindset that I did. So when I said no and someone was forcing me or peer pressuring me, there were one or two other people that would stand up with me and be like, hey, listen, we don't drink,
Right.
so
That's cool.
go somewhere else, go talk to someone else, but leave us alone. We don't drink, we don't want to drink, we don't like to drink. Stop forcing us to do something that we don't want to do. And I
Yeah.
think that part is important. Like I said, having those like-minded people who sort of support you and are in your corner. Because I mean, it's a very different thing if you go into another school where everybody's drinking, everybody's doing drugs. It's a lot harder to say no because I mean, you want to fit in at that stage. You want to be cool.
Like
So
I'm
that's
blessed.
what's yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not mentioning names, but you know where I'm going with it, But I guess
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's like that's why I said I'm a big believer of it's the people that you meet in your life that sort of shape your future. If they always say, hang around 5 millionaires, you become the sixth. Um, hang around five gym people, you become the sixth. But hang around 10 fat people, you become the 11th. Hang around 10 poor people, you become the 11th. And
Doesn't that give
I,
you anxiety? Like, what happens if you just don't, you hang around the millionaires and you just a bum?
you know, that's not actually the case. And we'll go on to this at a later stage. So, and maybe it'll come up in your questions, but we'll just touch on it now. Um, from about 2023 till 2025, so end of last year, September last year, actually, I was studying my MBA. So September 25th last year, I submitted my final research. It got approved and I qualified. So I'm just waiting for graduation, which will happen in December this year. But technically, I've got my MBA and I did it through Henley Business School.
Okay,
And
nice. Livonia.
yeah, yeah, that's the one. And what's interesting is, of course, think of the people who are studying MBAs now, right? You're not getting your people fresh out of high school. You're not getting your low-level employees because, first of all, an MBA is expensive. An MBA, you're gonna pay anywhere between
That's like,
350 to 450,000 rand for an MBA. Insane.
oh,
It's
what?
madness, right? All right. Now I'm about to answer a question. This is the important part now, right? So that being said, or that goes is that very rarely will you get a person paying for it themselves. It's always sponsored through a company, which in my case it was. I was working for Old Mutual at the time, so Old Mutual sponsored my MBA for me.
Yeah.
Right. So what's important is to note is that, like I said, when you're in there, what are the type of people that you're around? You're there with, well, you're there sitting and rubbing shoulders with business owners, entrepreneurs, very high levels, or call them C-suite executives. So, in
Okay.
there, I'm sitting next to a CFO, a CIO, a head of legal, a head of HR, head of marketing, whatever the case. So that's where you're rubbing shoulders with, right?
Straight.
And what I realized is, like, don't get me wrong, as much as the coursework, the the thinking that they teach you, that analytical way of thinking is very, very important. That application, of
True.
taking it one step further in the business world, super important. Don't get me wrong. But one of the most invaluable things is just that the networks and the relationships that you build, because you're basically stuck in a room and you're forced to collaborate with a group of people. And like I said, that group of people are CFOs, CIOs, entrepreneurs, head of
Yeah.
departments, whatever the case is. And maybe it was just me, but when I was sitting in that room with those people and listened to the questions that they were answering, understanding their level of thinking and sort of elevating my way, it was weird. Like in those 3 days, I was so motivated just to
Yeah.
be the best person that I could be. Just, I don't know if it was, like the energy from the
Yeah.
room, the energy of those people, the way they think, the way they operate, and obviously having a whole bunch of like-minded people in that room together. It's just,
Yeah.
just, just it just expands tenfold.
True.
So that's why, like I said, firm believer of hang around a certain number of certain people of a similar thinking,
True.
you will become one of those people, for
For
good or
sure.
for bad.
Okay, because also they're like well, accessibility and proximity. So I do get that accessibility and proximity, they can be key defining, let's say, indicators in, let's say, what our old view of success was. Let's say millionaires.
Hmm.
Like you said, you'll be the sixth one because of proximity and accessibility.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would have to find that through, there's many other ways. Let's say books. Like I don't read books. I swear, I stopped reading books in like primary school. I'm not even lying. The other books
Hmm.
I read were like studying, when we were studying